Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining this special education event, Understanding Eating Disorders, What Parents and Caregivers Need to Know. I'm Aubrey Robinson, NAMI-NYC's Youth Peer Support Manager. Eating disorders have one of the highest mortality rates of any psychiatric condition, yet recovery is possible with timely, specialized care. And we know parents and caregivers are often the first line of defense. We're so glad you're here with us to learn how to recognize the signs, respond with confidence, and connect your child with effective treatment. We're honored to welcome our guest speaker tonight, Melainie Rogers. Melainie Rogers is the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center in New York City. A distinguished leader in the field of eating disorders, Melainie has served as president of the International Association of Eating Disorders Professionals New York chapter and is widely recognized for her expertise in clinical nutrition, treatment programming, and professional education. To tell you a little bit about us, NAMI-NYC has been providing free education, support, and advocacy for families and individuals affected by mental illness for over 40 years. Our programs are always free, confidential, and open to anyone who needs them. For parents and family members, we offer classes, a helpline, support groups, and, and more. In addition, we also offer programs for young people, including a specific support group and helpline just for teens. If you have any technical difficulties tonight or have questions for our guest, please share them in the chat. We will have time for questions and answers at the end. We value your feedback, so please take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of the program as well. Without further delay, I'll hand things over to Melainie. Thank you so much.
Aubrey, thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for the very kind invitation. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Lovely to see some faces live on Zoom as well. And I'm super excited to be speaking tonight about eating disorders with a particular lens for parents and caregivers and what to look for, signs and symptoms. But the overall take-home message I would like to say is, if nothing else, that people leave with the idea that eating disorders are absolutely treatable and full recovery is very much possible. So I want to start and finish with definitely a message of hope. So I'm just going to share my screen here and we can jump in. Let me go back here. Okay, so tonight, understanding eating disorders, what parents and caregivers need to know. And please do use the chat. Aubrey's so kind to is going to be checking out the chat, letting me know along the way. And of course, we'll have Q&A at the end. We are recording tonight's presentation, so you will have that as a resource as well. And I've listed some resources at the very end for you all. So without further ado, let's jump in. So tonight, what I'm hoping to cover with you is what are eating disorders and how are they different to disordered eating? What role does body image play? Red flags, so signs and symptoms, what to look for, what to observe, and social media, what role does that play, both positive and negative? Practical steps then for parents, and I've added in a little bit also around treatment team members, where to go for help and resources as well. So disordered eating and eating disorders, they are absolutely not obvious, and most of the time you wouldn't know. We hear these kind of statements a lot from not just family members, but also from doctors, where the doctor will even say she looks fine, or the pediatrician will say, you know, he's not underweight, so all is well. And also, we often have kiddos come in or teens where the parents have been told that their son or daughter needs to actually lose weight. And why is that concerning? Because we should never put any kids on weight loss plans. In fact, it's the research tells us not to do that, but rather to kind of help the kiddos grow into their weight over time if they've fallen off the growth chart. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Eating disorders are very secretive. Part of that is because a large part of eating disorders is shame. There's a lot of shame around having an eating disorder. There's also a very significant level of, what's the word? estimating actually how much trouble someone may be in with their eating disorder because it's so normalized. So shame and secrecy and even intentional deception are part of the illness and not part of that person's personality, but it is very much a part of the illness. And even if you have a great line of communication with your teen or your kiddos, because of shame, because of secrecy, etc., you may not always get the full truth. And to not take that personally because it is unfortunately part of the traits. Eating disorders, we used to think impacted only white young teenage girls who came from wealthy backgrounds. Well, now we know they don't discriminate. They're global, they're everywhere. All nationalities, races, cultures, all genders, and all ages. In fact, the highest growing percentage of eating disorders now, aside from teenagers, is actually middle-aged women. We're seeing a huge uptick there. So it's blown up all kind of preconceived ideas, and eating disorders, as I said, are unfortunately to be found everywhere. What does that mean when we talk about gender? And I'm speaking in a very binary way here tonight, if you'll forgive me, because the research unfortunately presents data in that way at the moment. But as you would probably know, eating disorders are predominantly, we do see many more females with eating disorders. That statistic has leveled out though. We're now seeing more and more guys develop eating disorders. It's much more on the rise. So that's something to really think about if you have, teenage boys. Binge eating disorder, otherwise called BED, the ratio of guys and gals is a little bit more balanced between them. So that's one eating disorder where we do see a more even presentation. College population, if you've got college kids, 1 in 4 has a full-blown eating disorder. And I am really disappointed to say that in all of my outreach and presentations to a number of colleges throughout the tri-state area, very few colleges have a specialized eating disorder treatment team, which is just outrageous to think of that. Our LGBTQ population, 36%, 1 in 3 of these kiddos have a full-blown eating disorder and often undiagnosed. So where can we help? As far as treatment seeking, a really, really poor statistic of about only 10 to 15% of people ever get treatment for an eating disorder, which means people usually will go through their entire life with this terrible illness. And I think you'll all agree that we can do so much better than that. A big part of that is because there's just no screening. Our doctors are not screening, our therapists are not screening, our schools are not screening. And in addition to that, we have therefore low diagnostic rates. And then, of course, access to care is a big factor. So my hope is that if we're all working together, and if any one of you are actually working in a facility where you might be working with teens or even adults in a mental health or a healthcare capacity, to consider screening and putting it as part of your initial intake. So let's have a look at when we talk about population prevalence. So I've spoken about eating disorders. Lifetime prevalence is about 8 to 10% of the population. So that's about 30 plus million Americans in the course of their life will develop an eating disorder. That is an astonishing large number. And remember, only about 10% of those will ever get treatment, which is heartbreaking. However, something I also want to raise awareness about tonight is disordered eating, which is really, it's not the tip of the iceberg, it's the iceberg. And that is obviously, as you can see here, far more prevalent and can be as serious and as distressing and cause, mental health and medical concerns. So not to be, considered as less harmful, and it's kind of fine. That too is something that deserves treatment. Now, with disordered eating in our current culture of very diet-centric culture, thinking about your weight, counting calories, trying to lose weight, weighing yourself all the time, and having body image distress is so normalized that we have a word for it, and it's called normative discontent. We just think it's normal. But in fact, it's not. And we're going to dive a little deeper into what is disordered eating. And I would also like to put out my current thesis that disordered eating is driving the massive uptick of GLP-1 RA use that we're seeing right now with the Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, and also the pill form that just came out in the last 2 months or so. So a lot of people are experiencing a lot of distress. And I think, again, the proxy being how many people have reached out for that medication, which I think is 1 in 8 adults in the US alone. So let's go to our next slide here. So here I'm attempting to break down what's the difference between normal, disordered, and eating disorders. Eating disorders cause impairment. People often have to take medical leave. They need to drop out of school. Their relationships are not functioning, and they can develop mental health, big mental health concerns, and also huge suicide risk, and also very significant medical concerns. Disordered eating doesn't cause that level impairment, but causes a great deal of distress and has a number of mental health and medical consequences as well. So again, even though it's kind of the stepchild, it also is something that deserves treatment. So let's have a look at what's normal eating anyway in this current very diet-centric culture we live in. Normal eating is a compilation of different things from a neutral relationship with food, meaning your slice of pizza is just as important or valuable as your sushi, as your poke bowl, as your salad. It's just food, and all of that in moderation, which is the methodology or the approach. All foods fit. And again, yes, there's a balance. Our bodies are biological, systems that do require nutrients. However, my glass of wine and my Doritos are as important to me as having my broccoli and my fruits and vegetables. So again, all foods fit and moderation is a key factor there. Intuitive eating is the system that we're born with, and our bodies fight very, very hard to maintain our weight actually within an optimal weight for our own genetic blueprint. And intuitive eating, our internal regulatory system, hunger, fullness, satiety, is what guides us in order to be able to eat adequately. It's an internal system as opposed to an external system, such as counting calories and weighing food. And mindful eating means that hopefully you're enjoying your food, you're tasting your food, and you're eating food that you actually like. For disordered eating, it's kind of, there's a lot of things in this box here, and I'm not suggesting that anyone who is following a gluten-free diet or is vegetarian has disordered eating. But what we know from the research is anytime we start to manipulate our food plan and give it extra focus, even if it's for a medical concern such as diabetes, or I have irritable bowel and I need to be careful of certain foods, just having a heightened level of focus can start to make us obsessive. And when we start to get obsessive around food and food choices, that can lead to distress. It can lead to not wanting to go out and eating at certain restaurants, less flexibility around food, and that could precipitate disordered eating. And GLP-1 RAs are certainly leading the charge here. For eating disorders, then, I'm sure you're familiar with the terms anorexia and bulimia, binge eating. We only got a diagnostic code for that in 2013, whereas for anorexia and bulimia, those came about in the 70s and the 80s. I think the reason we didn't get a diagnostic code for binge eating disorder until 2013 was because of weight stigma. For so long, researchers, doctors, general public blamed clients who were in higher weight bodies, not knowing that there's actually a whole mechanism here at play that leads people to overeat as a way of protection, as a way of reducing anxiety, in the same way that for people with anorexia who undereat, in the absence of food, the brain creates more access to serotonin, and therefore clients in the absence of food with anorexia have less anxiety. So the brain is working in completely opposite ways with the overall goal of reducing anxiety, and therefore it's a protective type of illness. ARFID is a new one, otherwise it used to be called picky eating, and OSFID is anything that doesn't kind of fall neatly in these criteria. And in the red box there, you'll see two commonly used phrases that we're seeing a lot, particularly in social media now. Orthorexia, which is uber healthy eating to the point of being incredibly unhealthy. And you'll see a lot of this on Instagram with picture perfect photos of picture perfect food. And muscle dysmorphia. And this is the one that's impacting our guys the most, where that whole bulking up thing and the protein through the, off the charts. So that's to give you a breakdown when I'm talking about disordered eating versus when we're talking about eating disorders. And please do put any questions in the chat and yell out if you have any there, Aubrey. So disordered eating, it consists of unhealthy weight control practices, dieting, skipping meals. Who knew, right? We're always being told, oh, dieting, it's healthy for you. You should be, controlling your weight. Well, actually, it has some pretty significant negative impacts on the body. Typical onset of disordered eating, unfortunately, is in our teens, and you may see weight fluctuations within your kiddos as a result of this kind of inconsistent eating. Risk factors, we see increased rates of depressive symptoms, so mental health is impacted. And as I mentioned, the changes in weight and shape are also associated with the disease or illness. It is an actual illness. And we have this kind of eating disorder behavior cluster that is referred to in the research, where we have this obsessionality, this food preoccupation. Body image dissatisfaction is a key piece of this, and fear of weight gain. So those are key pieces. And I wonder whether people are looking at this right now and saying, I don't know anyone who has satisfaction or is happy with their body image, right? So it already hints to how many people are probably struggling with some of this. And our culture totally emphasizes it. So to sum up in this formula is dieting, any kind of dieting in adolescence automatically increases risk for disordered eating behaviors. So if your kiddo is dieting, skipping meals, watching, weighing themselves and obsessing, be alert. Definitely be alert. So, what causes an eating disorder? Okay, I think it's really important for us to have an understanding of this. There are a lot of myths out there, like it's just vanity, it's a stage, they'll grow out of it. Well, actually, none of the above are true. Eating disorders are actually a genetic illness that we carry and they travel through families. It's a very unfortunate term. The theory is called the loaded gun theory, whereby our genetics or the genes load the gun, but you need environmental pressures to pull the trigger. In the same way that someone might carry a genetic vulnerability for diabetes. It runs in the family. That does not mean that you're necessarily going to develop diabetes. But if certain circumstances or different environmental factors occur and your own relationship to food and exercise, you may therefore develop diabetes. It's the same with an eating disorder. And we're going to have a look at what exactly are those environmental pressures. So here they are. So cultural pressures, we live in a culture here in the States anyway, where it is diet centric and it is the thin ideal. Society also puts a lot of pressure and there's a conflation between health and weight. Families also can be very much image focused, or families could be very much focused on just movement and academics and other things, and not so focused on body image. So in this regard, families can be incredibly helpful, or depending on the family culture, unfortunately can kind of take the whole family down that rabbit hole as well. Personality is very much tied and linked to certain eating disorders. So for example, perfectionism is very linked to anorexia, and impulsivity and creativity and seeking out, new experiences is very much linked to bulimia and binge eating disorder. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Trauma, childhood trauma, the ACE scores, and also COVID for all of us. And then newer research that's just come out has indicated that neurodivergence, and this could be anything on our autism spectrum, and also ADHD kiddos, independently of all the other risk factors, can have heightened risk for developing an eating disorder. Part of that, if you think about ADHD, a lot of people with ADHD talk about time blindness. And they forget the time and they forget to eat. And then they get to the end of the day, and this is without medications. Then they're starving. They may eat and then overeat and then feel out of control because they've eaten too much. And then they may end up purging or feeling they need to, run 10 miles, or they just feel disgusted with themselves. And they get up the next day and say, I have to make up for what happened last night. I'm going to diet and restrict today. So it can set up an eating disorder pattern. Also, with ADHD and executive functioning, if you're not planning and having food available in your house or meal times. So this is more for kids who are away at college or young adults when they get to that start of life and they're more independent around meals. You can see how this can translate at that time. We believe the theory that dieting or any situation that creates our weight to go below what is optimal for our own genetic blueprint. If you have the genetic risk for an eating disorder, it will switch on the manifestation of that eating disorder. So GLP-1 use, dieting, food insecurity even, or even if you have an illness that drops your weight below optimal. If you have the genetic risk, there is the chance that an eating disorder can develop. And we have often seen that happen with clients with cancer who have inadvertently lost weight because of the treatment. And next thing you know, they've got this obsessionality around food and weight. Quite astonishing to think about that. Family history, anxiety and depression usually follows and is clustered with eating disorders and disordered eating in the family. So, for example, it's not that dad has bulimia, so, daughter has bulimia. It's not always as obvious as that. You will hear family members say, oh, you remember how grandpa used to have that? He'd only eat one meal a day, or, Auntie Joan used to do that thing. So it's this piecing together of often unusual eating patterns that were just considered as part of their quirky personalities. And remember, back in the day, we didn't have diagnostic codes. So, there's a good chance that many of our family members were never diagnosed. So let's talk about those environmental factors in a little bit more detail. Culturally, we spoke about the drive for thinness. The beauty ideal is a social construct. It's made up and it's made up and it changes, which is even worse. So, how is particularly a woman, because we're usually held to a beauty standard, how is a woman supposed to change her body over the decades according to the latest beauty ideal? It's ridiculous. So, Renaissance women, if any of you have seen some of those beautiful paintings, we often would see beautifully voluptuous, curvaceous women, where that kind of, softness and curvature was adored and considered to be beautiful, and is. Marilyn Monroe was a very curvaceous figure, and then we hit Twiggy. And then there was the 90s heroin chic. And then Kim Kardashian brought us back to more curves. You can't keep up. And how are you supposed to change your body to be looking like all these different beauty ideals? It's ridiculous. So I think stating that, putting that out there, realizing that, and making sure we remember that is very important to being able to push away the pressure that we often feel, because this social construct completely ignores the genetic reality of size diversity, people's individual genetic makeup, and therefore our own individual shapes and sizes. And so that does absolutely lead to body image distress and distortion. Socially speaking, we can have dieting friends, we can have dieting family, and social media often takes that messaging and just amplifies. For family, we spoke about if family is very weight and body focused, that can create a pretty unhealthy scenario for our teens. Personality, I mentioned perfectionism. Perfectionism, detail oriented, driven, anxious, a little bit maybe obsessive compulsive, needs everything just so. That often correlates or it has a tendency towards anorexia, and the impulsivity we see more with bulimia and binge eating. So, body image development and eating disorder risk, what is that link? And I'm going to walk you through kind of how we develop a sense of body and body image over time, and then when we start to really become concerned about that. So, our little ones start to recognize themselves around 2 years old. And by four, they're comparing themselves to others. But it's more about clothing and hair and those sorts of comparisons. Body size awareness around the age of 5, but it's a little bit more around I'm a big girl now, and you often hear kids say that, and it's adorable. By 6 years of old though, we start to see body image dissatisfaction. By late elementary school, 50% of girls are dissatisfied with their weight. Elementary school, so these kiddos are maybe just starting puberty or maybe just before. And they have a pervasive negative body esteem, which is heartbreaking, right? They're just babies. Social media, TV, film, toys like Barbie was the first kind of grown up woman toy. Prior to Barbie, dolls, etc., were more like babies. So Barbie and that whole piece, although the woman who first developed Barbie, if you saw the movie, you'll see that she developed it for her daughter because she wanted to, kind of make her help her with confidence, etc. But anyway, and so we have that. We also have peers and parental comments. So, children, 80% of all 10-year-olds are afraid of being fat. And if any of you are around little kids, it's horrible to hear them say that. Mummy, do you think I'm fat? My own little one at about that age asked me that. And my heart broke because this is what I do. I'm an eating disorder specialist, and I'm so hoping that, we are going to dodge that bullet. 42% though of our first through third grade girls want to be thinner, and the boys are not excluded here. For girls, especially, I want to focus on this very important time period between 8 years of age and 14. That's when girls go through maturation, boys do too. Our girls, on average, will gain about 40 pounds during that time, and that is normal growth. There is a increase in the number of fat cells that are produced in the body at this time, and that is so that the body can produce estrogen, it can store hormones, and it is preparing that young girl's body to eventually be able to have a child, whether she wants to or not. But that's what it's all about, right? And so this weight gain is completely normal. We often get parents come in and saying, my daughter has gained X amount of weight since she was 8 or 10, and they're very concerned that this is out of control weight gain, but in fact, it's normal. We don't learn enough about this to even know. So pre-adolescence and adolescence, this is when body dissatisfaction is hitting its lowest point, just as our kiddos are starting puberty, at the onset of puberty. Self-esteem is getting hit here. This is a high-risk time for depression, self-harm, eating disorders, and anxiety. So waving our flags to be observing during this time. And I think the big thing here is the distortion that can go along with body image, that the way our kids are seeing themselves in the mirror, if they have this predisposition, is very distorted, and they may see their body as bigger than what it actually is. And also, our boys are certainly not being left out of the equation. If anyone saw the Barbie movie, I know I'm a little dated now, it's a couple of years ago, but it's just as hard to be Ken as it is to be Barbie. So unfortunately, we're seeing, a real growth in boys developing eating disorders. Let's talk a little bit about social media and peer pressure. So, as we know, the teen years are a developmental stage where our teens are separating and individuating from parents. It's also one of those messy times. I have a teen myself right now. Oof. It's pretty tough with a teenage daughter. They have a mind of their own, which is all good, but it is hard. So anyway, they are much more vulnerable, as you know, to other influences. They're not listening to mum and dad so much anymore. They're listening to their friends, their peers. It's also a very self-conscious stage, as we probably remember ourselves. And social media is a part of our kids' life in a way that for many of us it never was. It was never present. But those friendships on social media can be helpful, but they can also be competitive. They can be triggering and they can encourage comparison in a way that leads to negative thoughts and feelings. And of course, we're aware that there's a lot of pro dieting and pro eating disorder websites out there and pro Anna, how to, be anorexic and such, which is just horrifying to see. And with respect to social media, I'm sure you've heard this before, but social media is believed to have a stronger impact on children's body image than traditional media, and that's because it's so targeted. If a message comes from a friend, it's perceived as more meaningful and credible, and we're seeing this in the research. We've also seen in the research how this social media platforms have known this for quite a while, but excessive use of Instagram, etc., has led to significant decline in mental illness such as depression and anxiety, particularly in our girls. I'm very pleased to see that there has been some successful lawsuits that we're just starting to see now around damage being done, intentional addiction of these platforms. So let's talk about us and what we're doing that could be also influencing our teens. We have a huge impact on our kids as we are told and as we know, but sometimes I think we forget. So directly we could be influencing our kids with comments about weight and shape. I hope none of us are saying anything about weight and shape and are like not saying anything there. But just as a reminder, because, kiddos with developing bodies, putting children on diets to lose weight is a big no-no from research. And even our pediatricians are still trained in older research. And so if your pediatrician says your kiddo needs to go on a diet, I would highly recommend you get a second opinion. Teasing also, I've seen parents who think that teasing their kiddo and using kind of more of a shame focused approach can help their child to maybe be more thoughtful around food choices. The kiddos finish school, they're starving, they all go to, I don't know, McDonald's and grab burgers and fries as their afternoon snack, etc. It's hard to balance that. I do understand. And then there's the indirect stuff that I think even speaks louder than words when our kids are watching what we do. So not just do as I say and not what I do. We have to walk the talk. Personality traits, I will say this, can make some of our kids more vulnerable than others. Our kids who are a little bit more highly anxious, a little bit more sensitive, they are more prone to lean on disordered eating or eating disorders, or I hope not, but that's where substance use comes in as well for our kiddos who are more vulnerable. And ADHD kids have a really high risk factor for using substances because it helps often to quieten down the chaos internally if their ADHD is not being perhaps managed as well. So, red flag signs and symptoms. Unfortunately, body shape alone is not going to tell you whether your kiddo has an eating disorder. You honestly can't tell. And that goes for all of the illnesses. We have clinicians tell us that I can tell if my client has an eating disorder by looking at them. And I've been doing this for 25 years and I couldn't tell you if someone has an eating disorder unless, of course, it's the very stereotypical skeleton-like person, which is actually very rare. So on average, you can't judge a book by the cover, and you really can't judge if someone has an eating disorder. So what do, right? Well, there is something that you can ask, and maybe not for us as parents to ask our kiddos, but hopefully our doctors or our therapists could be asking our kiddos or the, school counselor. if you ask this question, it's kind of getting under the hood of the car, so to speak. What's really going on internally in our kiddos' internal world? And that question is, how much of your day do you spend thinking about food, calories, and body image? And for our clients with anorexia, it's more than 100% of the day. And you can say, well, how is that possible? It's because our clients are dreaming about food. For bulimia, BN, and binge eating disorder, it's about 80% of the day, 85% of the day. What does that mean? That means that even while we're talking right now, or while you're having a conversation with your teen, if they have a full-blown eating disorder, there's a tape playing all the time in the background. So they're listening to you, they might even be talking to you, but they're also thinking about what did I have for breakfast? I shouldn't have had those French fries. Will my mum stop talking so I can slip out of the house and do my 5 mile run so I can burn off those French fries that I had earlier? Tomorrow I'm going to skip breakfast and lunch. And so it's this constant calculation of trying to reduce calories and over exercise and lose weight. It's absolutely exhausting. So you can see here that there comes a certain time where kids may not be able to focus on school as well as they might be able to because they just don't have the bandwidth. What's very interesting though is because of the perfectionism that we often see with anorexia, these kiddos will often still get straight A's while their body and their mental health is massively, massively on the decline, which is an extraordinary thing. It doesn't mean that they're okay just because they're still getting straight A's. This is just to say that every single system in the body is impacted by an eating disorder. Every single system. Yet, lab work may come back as normal, which is crazy making because then our clients come in and say, well, my blood work's normal. Or the parents also say, well, the blood work's normal. And often many doctors who are not trained with eating disorders will say the same. That is not the case. And we know this. There is no blood test for an eating disorder, and lab work alone is not so helpful. If lab work is starting to show some abnormalities, that's a huge red flag. It's already a concern. And we have other testing that we look at, weekend heart, EKGs, and we also look at behaviors, which we'll have a look at right now. One thing I do want to mention though is that any eating disorder has a level of restriction. For anorexia, it's ongoing restriction. For bulimia, it's restriction and then an overeating event and then vomiting or overexercising. For binge eating disorder, there's usually a period of restriction and then overeating without any purging. Often a food coma is what my clients describe it as, and then they might, pass out in bed and wake up the next day and restrict all day. What I'm saying is that every single eating disorder has some level of restriction, and therefore there is malnutrition in every single body with an eating disorder. For our clients who've lost significant weight, we also see atrophy of the brain. What that means, and you can very clearly see the atrophy here of the gray matter. The gray matter is the form of the brain, and the white matter is the myelin sheaths that connect the neurons, which is the cells in the brain for communication. And so what that means is that teenager's brain is not functioning optimally because it's not communicating optimally. And executive functioning, which is the prefrontal cortex here, which is the part of the brain that helps with reasoning, is still developing, but in a malnourished brain, it's basically offline. So that means that our kiddos are walking around in their amygdala, which is the fight, flight, flee part, the danger side of part of the brain, that's going on and on and on and on and on. And there's no prefrontal cortex to say, actually, it's okay, we're not in danger. So the anxiety is also overwhelming as a part of an eating disorder, and hence they cluster together. We know that even without an eating disorder, even without any kind of mental illness such as anxiety or depression, we know that just dropping weight alone increases anxiety, depression, rigidity with thoughts, obsessive thoughts, and rumination. We know this from a study that was done in World War II called the Minnesota Starvation Study. They had 32 conscientious objectors. They put them on a weight loss plan where they lost 25% of their body weight. They kept them on that weight loss plan for 6 months, and then they refed them and help them gain weight back to their normal weight. That was in preparation for when America entered the Second World War and going into Europe for what we may find there. We know this because the studies done on that group was just so extensive and it gave us so much information. So you can see here that, again, even without a predisposition towards anxiety and depression, any kind of weight loss is going to kick up these kind of mental health concerns. The good news of that, though, is that's very treatable. It's called food. And we regain and re-nourish our kiddos, and so much of this can be repaired. It's quite extraordinary. It takes time, but it can be repaired. I want to talk very quickly about growth charts because I think most of us as parents are not taught this. What I've marked here, this is a growth chart for girls from 2 to 20. And so when you go to your pediatrician with your kiddo and you do your annual, they'll mark on a growth curve the weight of your child for each year and also their height. I'm focusing here, and you see the black marks there on the bottom curve for a child who's tracking on the fifth percentile. So this kiddo was born as a little baby on the fifth percentile and is now tracking on the fifth percentile. That's their natural growth curve. That's their natural body weight. We call that their biologically appropriate weight. And so for this kiddo at age 20, they might be 100 pounds, and that is a normal weight for them because that's their growth curve. The other one with the little dots that are changing color is for a kiddo that was born and is tracking on the 75th percentile. And then hopefully throughout their elementary school and high school years, they track nicely at 75th percentile. And so that young girl at 20, her biologically appropriate weight could be somewhere in the 170, 160, 170 pound range. And that's normal for her. With growth charts, we're not looking for everyone to be at 50%. That's not the design. And 75th percentile, if that's where they were born, that's their genetic makeup. That is optimal for them. So we don't want them to drop down to 50 percentile so that they're at 130 pounds. That would be a suppression of their weight, and that could very much lead to, at the very least, disordered eating, if not an eating disorder, and all of that food chaos that goes on internally. So I think it's really important for us to know and think about our kids' growth chart. And where we would raise a flag, therefore, is if they dropped off their curve. So if our 75th percentile person at age 13, as they're going into maturation, maybe they drop down to the 50th, I would be like, whoa, what's going on here? That tells me that this kiddo is under eating, maybe dieting, or something else has happened. And likewise, if the kiddo goes up over the 95th percentile and there's a sudden weight gain, we'd also raise a flag and say, hey, there's something going on with the eating pattern that has changed. What's changed? And so, for example, some things that I've seen on the growth charts that might influence them, a change in school, mum and dad got divorced. I remember one little girl where she went up on the growth chart because she and her mum, after her mum went through a divorce, were sitting down at night eating ice cream together, which sounds like a lovely little thing to do. But I think mum was also maybe emotionally eating herself and her daughter was following suit. So we were able to, address that. So that's how we use the growth charts and that's how we read them. And so there is one, as you would imagine, for boys, and it's in blue via the CDC. Okay, so let's talk about some behaviors that you may observe around your teens, food tendencies, the rigidity, rituals with food, rules around food, and secrecy. So some of our kiddos will eat the same thing every day. For others, color, size, shape, and temperature are important. or there's time between meals, there has to be 6 hours between each meal, or they delay eating or avoid eating with others. And these are some other ways that food behaviors we see. For example, excessive microwave use or slow eating to make the meals last longer, cutting foods up into tiny bits. Other food behaviors, skipping meals, missing social events that include a meal, or saying, "Oh, I already grabbed dinner. I'm just going to grab dessert with you, or I'll grab a coffee, or I've already eaten." These are flags, or avoiding a whole food group, such as, no carbs, obsessive healthy eating, clean eating, increased interest in recipes and cooking shows. We had one teenager who was just cooking up a storm, and her parents were so proud of her. Oh my gosh, she cooked Thanksgiving and she made all these dishes. And I said, "Did she eat any of them?" And they said, "Oh, actually, no, not much. It's a thing." Extensive questioning of how a food dish is prepared, and then using veganism or vegetarianism as a way to avoid foods. GI concerns, stomach aches, food allergies, food intolerances, chew and spit behaviors. And then condiment use, we often see this, either excessive use of condiments to give flavor to bland food, or using a lot of condiments and really, really super hot sauce to make food taste so bad that they don't overeat, and lots of artificial sweetener. And then there are things called appetite suppressors, which, as that suggests, means that if you do these or use these, you can delay eating. So lots of coffee, diet soda, chewing gum, lots of vegetables. I had one client who would only allow themselves to eat raw carrots, unlimited raw carrots at night when she got home from work, and she started to change orange because of the beta carotene. It was that bad. And then smoking. We often feel that our teens won't eat, like just eat, but in fact, because of the way the brain is functioning, food has now become a very fearful object. And fear of weight gain is a very, very real anxiety. And it really is more about I can't eat as opposed to I just won't. So don't take it personally that your kiddo is now just being defiant. For bulimia, we have restrictive tendencies followed by high intake of food. You may see large quantities of food go missing, and I don't mean just because you've got a couple of teenage boys in the house who are eating you out of the house and home. Large food bills. This often will come up in college, and the kiddo has um, a family credit card, and you start to see high food bills, for example. Running in the shower when they go to the bathroom to muffle any purging sounds. We had one family where the mum said, "All my coffee mugs went missing." She went into her daughter's bedroom. She was trying to put away some clothes. She opened a drawer. All her coffee mugs were in the drawer, and they were all full of purging, of vomiting. And there can be problems with house plumbing. You may start to see that some of your sinks are getting blocked, etc. It could be because there's purging going on, and often we'll see weight fluctuations. So bottom line here, eating disorders are not obvious, and they can be difficult to detect because some of these, signs and symptoms I've given here could be, quite benign. And as we said, the nature of eating disorders is quite secretive, and there can also be a lot of denial. So, as parents, how can you help? First, what not to say. Whew. I know it's tempting, and I've said it myself, but you're being completely unreasonable. Try not to say that. You need help. You aren't eating enough. You're bulimic, anorexic. You have an eating disorder. So very accusatory, very judgmental. You're being silly. You just get over it and eat. You look terrible. Have you gained weight? So even though as a parent, I can see myself wanting to say many of these things, um, our goal here is not to say those. And let's think about some things here. Let's break it down. So first, let's start with social media literacy. We talked about how that's such a huge impact on kiddos. This is an opportunity to talk to your kids about cultural ideas that I just mentioned, particularly for our girls with that body image ideal, and also for the guys with the body dysmorphia and the muscle dysmorphia, to talk about how it's a social construct, how society is putting pressure on all of us to basically look the same, but we're not meant to look the same. We have size diversity, and it's not healthy to try and make our bodies conform into this shape that isn't our real body. And talk about how social media reinforces that, and therefore talk about what are we following on social media? Does it make us feel better about ourselves or worse? If it makes us feel worse, following or unfollowing some of those different influences or whatnot that you might be following, or less of it is better. And there's a lot of really cool, inspirational, body positive accounts out there to follow as well. For our parents, directly to eliminate fat talk at home. Really maybe take a moment to think about, what you do say. So is there weight and appearance talk in the house? Try to reduce that or just eliminate it. Catch yourself before making comments about other people's appearance or weight. Refrain from making comments about your own body because our kids are listening. And also, definitely, we don't want to be making comments about your teen's body and weight. And indirectly be aware of what you're modeling. Are you being critical of yourself in the mirror? Are family members dieting? Are they on GLP-1s? Are they skipping meals? Is the whole family becoming obsessive with exercise to be healthy? And we've seen families now who are all together, including the kids, all going on GLP-1s to be healthy, which is really frightening. Are family members weighing themselves frequently and commenting on that? And maybe a parent or a caregiver needs their own help because, as we know, eating disorders and disordered eating runs in families. So it's highly likely someone in the family may need their own help. Positive and supportive family environment. We want to move away from the external, the appearance, and talk more about the person in our encouragement, in our praise for our kids. Talk to them about their accomplishments rather than their appearance. Talk to them about their strengths of character, their behavior. Eat together if you can as a family. I know everyone's busy, but just once a week even is great. Emotional attunement, validation, and being heard. And I have to say, while I was prepping for this today and I read that first point, I thought, yes, I'm really struggling with this one. And my daughter keeps saying, listen to me, Mum. I'm supposedly well versed in this and I'm still struggling. So I just want to validate how it is, how hard it is being a parent. But, again, I'm reminding myself to really listen. Don't interrupt. I interrupt. I have to do less of that. Use positive mirroring. I hear what you're saying. So you're saying X, is that right? Collaborate when it's appropriate. Compassion and gentleness. We know this, but it's hard to do in the moment, right? And then speak to your teen about getting some extra help so they can feel better. And eating disorders don't go away on their own. Unfortunately not. Specialized help is often needed. However, as I said, good help, the right help, can absolutely people fully recover from eating disorders. And the sooner we catch the illness, even disordered eating, the far better the outcomes. So get support for yourself as well. And educate yourself. Eating Disorder Alliance is a great one. NAMI as well. Also the National Eating Disorder Association and my center Balance. We have lots of blogs and webinars on our YouTube channel. Treatment team just in short, I want you to know that none of our healthcare professionals or our mental health professionals get training, including RDs. No one, still to this day. So if your PCP doesn't have extra training, they may not have all the answers. And even our pediatricians, as I said earlier, don't get training on eating disorders, which is just so frustrating. And as I mentioned earlier, lab work can often be normal, and that doesn't mean everything is okay. An eating disorder team is made up of these individuals: a therapist, an RD for the food piece, registered dietitian, an MD for blood work, and a psychiatrist if needed for medication. So this is a biopsychosocial illness, which means it has a biological component, a psychological component, and a social component. It's very complex and multifaceted, and therefore the gold standard of treatment is to have those different team members looking at the illness from all of the different angles. The biggest mistake we see people make is they help their teen get a therapist, and that's great, but that's it. And no matter how much talk therapy you do, you can't talk yourself out of an eating disorder. You definitely need the food piece and the MD piece as well. And so how the team works together, the registered dietitian and the therapist are doing a lot of the work to re-nourish the body, re-nourish the brain, help the client get back on track with consistent food, skills to help with anxiety and all the different barriers to recovery, including body image distress. And the medical doctor and the psychiatrist are there to make sure that the client's medically stable and psychiatrically stable, and there isn't a risk of self-harm and suicide. So that's kind of how the team works together. And the best medicine and the first medicine is food. And we can absolutely re-nourish that brain and get the brain back on track, get the body back on track, and get your kiddo back to themselves. And many of our parents have seen a massive personality change in their kids when they go through an eating disorder. And they talk about how they get their child back, they get their beautiful boy or daughter back once they start to re-nourish the brain. It's an incredible thing. So again, full recovery is absolutely possible with the right care. These are some questions here for your doctors or your mental health professionals. And there's just a couple of quick questions that have been validated through the research that they can use to screen for eating disorders and to screen out. Please don't ask these yourself to your teen because these are too direct and it'll influence the dynamic between teen and parent. But just so you know, there are some screening questions that your professionals can refer to. And in conclusion, some books for parents, and there's audio books. All of these are on audio as well. But these are some the top six. And this snapshot here called Sick Enough is one of the best books I've read. It's a guide to the medical complications of eating disorders, but it's terrific for anyone, parents, teens, your MD, your therapist, your RD, anyone. It's just a fantastic book and very, very easily to read. And Jen Guardiani, the doctor who wrote it, very, very savvy in eating disorders, has been in the field for a couple of decades and will do actually telehealth consultations as well. And then there are podcasts, and this is just there's heaps of podcasts where you can learn and educate yourself as well around eating disorders. And we are in conclusion. Anyway, what a pleasure. Thank you all so much for joining us. And again, a big thank you to NAMI New York City. You guys do amazing work. Aubrey, thank you again for hosting and putting all of this together and the opportunity to come and present tonight. Thank you.